The morning briefing room at Nellis Air Force Base held that particular tension that comes before classified operations. Coffee grew cold in ceramic mugs as 24 pilots studied satellite imagery on wall-mounted screens. The images showed something that shouldn't exist: a formation of aircraft moving through restricted airspace over Nevada's test and training range, their vapor trails forming geometric patterns that defied conventional flight doctrine. "Gentlemen, ladies," Colonel Hayes began, his weathered face betraying decades of combat experience, "what you're seeing was captured at 3:47 hours this morning. These contrails appeared for exactly 12 minutes before vanishing completely. No flight plans filed, no IFF transponders active, no radio chatter recorded." The room stirred with murmurs. In the back row, Captain Adrian "Ghost" Valk kept her expression neutral while her mind raced. Something about those patterns nagged at her, not random, not chaotic, but deliberate, purposeful, like a message written in the sky. "Intelligence suggests possible foreign incursion," Hayes continued, advancing to the next slide. "Your mission is reconnaissance and identification. Rules of engagement are weapons tight unless directly threatened. Questions?" A hand shot up from the front row. Major Brooks, Squadron Golden Boy, fresh from Top Gun with enough swagger to fill the hangar. "Sir, those trails look like standard four-ship formations. Could be our own birds on a black project." "Negative, all our assets are accounted for." Hayes's eyes swept the room. "Captain Valk, you've been unusually quiet." Adrian felt 23 pairs of eyes turn toward her. The only woman in the room, the only pilot who'd been passed over for promotion twice, the only one they called Ghost, not for her skill, but because she seemed to disappear into the background during briefings. They expected her to ask about weather conditions or request additional support aircraft. Safe questions from the safe pilot. Instead, she stood slowly, her flight suit crisp despite the early hour. "Sir, permission to speak freely." "Granted." "Those aren't random contrails. Look at the spacing, the timing intervals between formation changes. Someone's using our own sky as a communication medium." She moved to the projection screen, her finger tracing the patterns. "This isn't an incursion, it's a recall signal." The room fell silent. Hayes leaned forward, studying her face with newfound interest. "Explain." "Tactical formation Charlie 77, then Delta 44, then a perfect echelon right. That's not foreign doctrine, sir. That's ours. Someone's calling our people home using a language only we would understand." Brooks scoffed, Ghost seeing patterns in clouds again. But Hayes wasn't looking at Brooks. He was staring at the screen, at patterns that suddenly seemed less random and more like words written in vapor and desperation across the endless Nevada sky. "Mission parameters are changing," he announced quietly. "This is no longer reconnaissance. We're going hunting for our own." The alert klaxon shattered the morning calm at Nellis Air Force Base, its wailing cry echoing across the tarmac where ground crews scrambled like ants whose hill had been kicked. Within minutes, 12 F-22 Raptors sat ready on the flight line, their angular stealth profiles gleaming under the harsh Nevada sun. The morning briefing had ended with more questions than answers, but now those questions would have to wait. Captain Adrian Valk walked her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision, her hands checking control surfaces and weapons hardpoints with the familiarity of a pianist touching familiar keys. Her Raptor, tail number 4077, bore no special markings beyond the standard Air Force insignia, but she knew every rivet, every panel, every quirk of its fly-by-wire system. This aircraft had brought her home from Syria, from the Horn of Africa, from places that didn't officially exist on mission reports. "Ghost, you copying this weather update?" The voice belonged to Captain Rico Mendoza, her wingman for the past 2 years. Of all the pilots in the squadron, Rico was the only one who used her call sign without mockery in his voice. "Copy Spike. Winds favoring runway 27, visibility unlimited." She secured her helmet, the familiar weight settling around her ears. "You still think I'm chasing shadows up there?" Negative ghost. "Your pattern recognition saved our asses over Kandahar. If you say those contrails mean something, they mean something." The radio crackled with tower communications as aircraft began their engine start sequences. Adrian settled into her ejection seat, her hands moving through the startup checklist with automatic precision. Around her, the Raptor's systems came alive, displays flickering to life, computers running diagnostics, the twin Pratt and Whitney engines beginning their distinctive whine. "Wraith Flight, this is Tower. You're cleared for departure runway 27, tactical formation. Maintain heading 090 until clear of Class Delta airspace." "Tower, Wraith 11 copies." Major Brooks's voice carried its usual confidence over the radio. As flight lead, he'd made it clear during the brief that Ghost's theories about recall signals were interesting but secondary to the primary mission of identification and pursuit. The 12 Raptors taxied in formation, their exhaust creating heat mirages that danced across the desert floor. Adrian felt the familiar pre-mission focus settling over her thoughts like a well-worn jacket. Somewhere out there in the vast Nevada sky, unknown aircraft were writing messages in vapor trails, and every instinct she developed over 8 years of combat flying screamed that this wasn't what it appeared to be. "Wraith Flight, you're cleared for takeoff. Godspeed." The runway stretched ahead like a river of concrete flowing toward the mountains. 12 throttles advanced to military power, then afterburner, and the morning silence shattered as America's most advanced fighters clawed their way into the desert sky, chasing ghosts made of water vapor and mystery. The Nevada test range spread beneath them like a moonscape painted in shades of brown and gold, the morning sun casting long shadows across valleys that had witnessed decades of classified experiments. At 35,000 feet, the 12 F-22s of Wraith Flight maintained loose combat spread, their radar signatures no bigger than golf balls despite each aircraft weighing nearly 40,000 pounds fully loaded. "Wraith 11, contact Blackjack Control on secure frequency. Authentication Papa 779er." The AWACS controller's voice carried the calm professionalism that came from watching air battles from 200 miles away. Major Brooks switched frequencies smoothly. "Blackjack, Wraith 11 with 12 Raptors, requesting vector to target area." "Wraith 11, Blackjack Control. Proceed heading 120, descend to flight level 280. Target area is approximately 40 miles southeast of your position. Be advised, we're showing intermittent radar contacts, but nothing consistent." From her position in the formation's rear element, Adrian scanned the endless blue above and the desert floor below. The contrails they'd studied in the briefing room had appeared and vanished like writing on water, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they'd been looking at the sky equivalent of smoke signals. Someone had wanted those patterns to be seen, recorded, analyzed. "Ghost, you getting anything on your sensors?" Rico's voice came through on their discrete frequency. "Negative contact, but Spike, check your RWR scope. I'm getting intermittent hits from the southwest, bearing 210. Frequency suggests it's our own gear, but..." "But what?" Adrian studied her radar warning receiver display, watching the faint electronic signatures that appeared and disappeared like fireflies at dusk. "The pulse repetition frequency is wrong. It's our equipment, but it's been modified. Someone's using our own technology to stay invisible to us." "Wraith Flight, Wraith 11. Visual contact 2 o'clock low, approximately 15 miles. Brooks's voice carried sudden tension. 4 aircraft in tactical formation heading northwest. There. Jesus Christ, they're F-22s. The radio fell silent except for the whisper of encrypted static. For F-22 Raptors flew in perfect diamond formation 15,000 feet below them, their gray camouflage barely visible against the desert landscape. But these aircraft bore no national markings, no squadron identifiers, nothing to indicate their origin or intent. Blackjack Control Wraith 11. I have visual on 4 military aircraft, type F-22, bearing unknown markings, requesting instructions. The pause from AWACS stretched longer than normal. When the response came, it carried an edge that made every pilot in Wraith flight check their weapons systems. Wraith 11, those aircraft are not, repeat not, on any authorized flight plan. You are cleared to intercept and identify. The sky that had seemed so peaceful moments before suddenly felt dangerous. The hunt began with the subtle dance of aerial interception. 12 F-22s splitting into 3 4-ship elements as they descended toward their mysterious quarry. At 25,000 feet, the target aircraft remained in their diamond formation, apparently unaware of the American fighters converging from above like hawks circling prey. Wraith 11 closing to 5 miles for visual identification, Brooks transmitted, his professional calm masking the tension that every pilot felt. Wraith 21, take your element around to the north. Wraith 31, swing wide to the south. We're going to box them in. Adrian flew as Wraith 33, the number 3 aircraft in the southern element led by Captain Torres. Through her canopy, she could see the suspect formation growing larger, 4 angular shapes that looked exactly like her own aircraft but carried an aura of wrongness that made her skin crawl. No squadron markings, no national insignia, not even the maintenance stencils that decorated every legitimate military aircraft. Range 4 miles and closing, Torres called. I'm not getting any response to IFF interrogation. These birds are running completely dark. The radio crackled with a new voice, calm and measured. American aircraft, this is Talon Lead. We are conducting authorized operations in this airspace. Request you maintain safe separation and continue your mission. Brooks's response came sharp and immediate. Talon Lead, this is Major Brooks, United States Air Force. You are operating in restricted airspace without authorization. Identify yourself and state your intentions. Major Brooks, we are not required to provide that information. Again, recommend you maintain separation. Adrian felt ice water flow through her veins. The voice on the radio was American, the accent unmistakably Midwestern, but something in the tone suggested training and discipline that went beyond normal military structure. These weren't foreign pilots flying stolen aircraft. These were their own people, operating under orders that came from somewhere outside normal command channels. Wraith 33 Ghost, you copy that transmission. Rico's voice cut through her thoughts. Loud and clear, Spike. Voice recognition software would probably id him as one of ours. She paused, studying the unmarked raptors through her targeting pod. Question is, whose orders is he following? The 4 mysterious aircraft suddenly broke formation, splitting into 2 elements that began a climbing turn toward the northeast. The movement was perfectly executed, textbook tactical doctrine, but it carried them directly toward the heart of Area 51's restricted airspace. All Wraith elements, targets are maneuvering toward Groom Lake. Do not pursue into that airspace without clearance. Brooks's voice carried the strain of a pilot caught between conflicting orders. But as the unmarked F-22s climbed toward the forbidden zone, Adrian noticed something that made her blood run cold. The leader's aircraft was trailing a thin line of vapor, not from engine exhaust but from something else entirely. A deliberate release of some kind of marking agent, creating a pattern in the sky that looked exactly like the recall formation from the morning's intelligence briefing. Wraith 11 Ghost, the lead aircraft is marking our position. Someone's going to know exactly where we are. The desert below stretched endlessly toward the horizon, a landscape of secrets and shadows where America's most classified programs lived in underground facilities and restricted airspace. The 4 unmarked F-22s climbed steadily toward Groom Lake, their vapor trail signatures creating a breadcrumb path that any satellite could follow. Adrian watched them through her targeting display, her finger hovering near the master arm switch while her mind raced through possibilities. Blackjack control, Wraith 1-1 requesting permission to pursue targets into restricted airspace. Brooks's voice carried the frustration of a hunter watching prey escape into forbidden territory. The AWACS response came loaded with tension. Wraith 1-1, negative. Maintain current position and observe. Higher authority is coordinating response. Higher authority. The phrase sent chills through every pilot in the formation. In the black world of classified operations, higher authority could mean anyone from the Secretary of Defense to organizations that didn't officially exist. Someone with enough clearance to authorize F-22s without markings, pilots without names, missions without oversight. Ghost, check your data link. I'm showing multiple new contacts bearing 040, Angels 25. Rico's voice carried a note of concern that made Adrian immediately switch her attention to the tactical display. 8 new radar signatures had appeared from the northeast, climbing rapidly from what appeared to be underground launch points. The computers tentatively identified them as F-22s, but their radar cross-sections were slightly different, as if the stealth coatings had been modified or the aircraft themselves had been upgraded beyond standard specifications. Wraith Flight, we have multiple bogies inbound from Groom Lake restricted area. Count 8 aircraft, type unknown, bearing 040 at 25 miles. Tor's voice cut through the radio chatter with cold professionalism. The tactical situation had just shifted from mysterious to potentially lethal. 12 American pilots found themselves caught between 4 unmarked F-22s heading into restricted airspace, and 8 more aircraft of unknown intent climbing to intercept from a facility that didn't exist on any public map. Blackjack, Wraith 1-1. I need immediate clarification on rules of engagement. Are we looking at hostile aircraft or friendly forces conducting classified operations? The pause from AWACS stretched so long that several pilots began checking their radio equipment. When the response finally came, it carried a weight that spoke of phone calls to Pentagon basements and secure video conferences with people whose names never appeared in news reports. Wraith 1-1, maintain current position. Do not engage any aircraft unless fired upon. Authentication code is Broken Arrow 779er. Broken Arrow. The phrase hit every pilot like a physical blow. Nuclear weapons incident. Missing nuclear materials. Or in this case, missing aircraft with capabilities that could shift the balance of power in any conflict. The unmarked F-22s weren't just unidentified aircraft. They were stolen American technology being used for purposes that required the highest levels of classification to discuss. The sky above Nevada had become a chessboard where the pieces were measured in billions of dollars, and the stakes reached far beyond national security into the realm of global stability. The 8 aircraft climbing from Groom Lake resolved into a formation that defied every tactical manual Adrian had ever studied. They flew in a perfect octagon, each fighter precisely positioned relative to the others, creating a geometric pattern that suggested computer-controlled flight systems beyond anything in the standard F-22 arsenal. Their climb rate exceeded normal Raptor performance by nearly 30%. Jesus Christ, look at those things move, Rico muttered over the discrete frequency. Ghost, those aren't standard Raptors. Someone's been busy in the skunk works. Adrian studied the approaching formation through her targeting pod, noting details that sent ice through her veins. The aircraft looked like F-22s from a distance, but the air intakes were larger, the vertical stabilizers canted at a different angle, and the exhaust nozzles showed a configuration she'd never seen before. These weren't missing aircraft. They were evolved aircraft, prototypes that represented the next generation of American air superiority. Wraith Flight, new contacts are squawking friendly IFF codes. Brooks's voice carried the confusion of a pilot trying to process information that contradicted everything he thought he knew about American military structure. Blackjack, confirm friendly status on the 8 aircraft ascending from restricted area. Wraith 11, authentication confirmed. Those aircraft are operating under special compartmented information protocols. You are directed to maintain separation and provide escort services as required. The radio exchange crystallized the nightmare scenario every military pilot feared. Being caught in the middle of operations so classified that normal command structures didn't apply. The unmarked F-22s continued their climb toward 30,000 feet, while the 8 advanced aircraft from Groom Lake adjusted their formation to bracket the entire airspace. All aircraft, this is Talon lead on guard frequency. The voice that had identified itself earlier now carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. American fighters, you are interfering with a time-critical operation. Recommend immediate withdrawal to base. Brooks keyed his microphone with visible frustration. Talon lead, I am operating under direct orders from higher authority. State the nature of your operation and provide authentication codes. Major Brooks, some operations exist above your clearance level. Check your secure message traffic for new orders. As if summoned by the transmission, every F-22 and Wraith flight received simultaneously transmitted messages on their secure communication systems. Adrian watched her display fill with text that made her question everything she thought she knew about her own military. The message was brief, classified at levels she'd never seen before, and signed by officials whose existence was theoretical until this moment. Stand down. Provide escort. Ask no questions. Report nothing beyond standard patrol log entries. Wraith flight, this is Wraith 11. New mission parameters received. We are now providing high-altitude escort for classified operations. Maintain current formation and observe. But as the complex aerial ballet continued above the Nevada desert, Adrian noticed something that the secure messages and higher authorities hadn't accounted for. The vapor trail from the lead unmarked aircraft wasn't random. It was still forming the recall pattern she'd identified in the morning briefing. Someone was using the sky itself as a message board, and the message wasn't meant for American intelligence services. It was meant for whoever was watching from space. The realization hit Adrian like a physical blow as she studied the vapor patterns spreading across the high desert sky. The recall formation wasn't being created for ground-based observers or satellite reconnaissance. It was a signal being broadcast to something already in orbit, something that would recognize the specific geometric patterns as a prearranged communication protocol. Spike, switch to tactical frequency 7 and keep it quiet, she transmitted to Rico on their discrete channel. I need you to run your electronic warfare suite and look for any uplink transmissions from those unmarked birds. Ghost, we're supposed to be maintaining radio silence except for essential communications. This is essential, trust me. She watched Rico's aircraft bank slightly as he adjusted his sensors to scan for electromagnetic emissions from the 4 unmarked F-22s. The results appeared on his data link within minutes, and when he transmitted them to her aircraft, Adrian felt her stomach drop. The unmarked aircraft were broadcasting encrypted burst transmissions on frequencies reserved for satellite communication. But the encryption algorithms were unlike anything in the American military inventory. The patterns suggested Soviet-era cryptography that had been updated with quantum computing techniques that shouldn't exist outside theoretical mathematics laboratories. Ghost, you're not going to like this. Those transmission patterns match intelligence reports from the Syria theater last year. Someone's using our own aircraft to communicate with foreign intelligence satellites. The pieces of the puzzle began forming a picture that challenged everything Adrian thought she knew about loyalty, duty, and the chain of command. The unmarked F-22s weren't missing American aircraft. They were American aircraft being operated by American pilots under orders from someone who had access to the highest levels of military command structure, but whose ultimate loyalty lay elsewhere. Wraith 3 maintain position and radio discipline. Captain Tor's voice carried a warning tone. As element leader, he'd obviously been monitoring their discrete frequency communications. But Adrian's attention had shifted to her radar warning receiver, which was now painting contacts from multiple directions. The 8 advanced aircraft from Groom Lake had been joined by additional contacts climbing from underground facilities throughout the Nevada test range. The sky was filling with aircraft that officially didn't exist, operated by pilots whose names appeared on no roster, conducting missions that fell outside every treaty and agreement that governed military aviation. All aircraft, this is Overwatch Control on guard frequency. The new voice carried an authority that made every pilot in the area immediately pay attention. Classified flight operations are now commencing in this airspace. All participating aircraft will maintain position and provide support as directed. Any deviation from assigned parameters will result in immediate termination of flight status. Termination of flight status. In the antiseptic language of military communications, it was a polite way of saying that any pilot who asked too many questions or flew outside their assigned area would find themselves facing a surface-to-air missile fired by their own people. The sky above Nevada had become a theater where America was at war with itself, and the only witnesses were pilots who had sworn oaths to protect and defend a constitution that might not apply to whatever was happening 30,000 feet above the desert floor. The formation of unmarked aircraft began a shallow descent toward the southeast, their flight path taking them directly over the most sensitive testing areas of the Nevada range. Adrian watched through her heads-up display as the lead aircraft continued releasing vapor trails in precise, geometric patterns that looked increasingly like navigation waypoints for something approaching from orbit. Wraith Flight, adjust heading to 080 and maintain escort formation, came the order from Overwatch Control. The voice belonged to someone who clearly expected immediate compliance without discussion. Major Brooks acknowledged the order, but Adrian could hear tension in his transmission. 12 American pilots were being used as unwitting participants in an operation that none of them understood, providing legitimacy and escort services for aircraft that might be conducting espionage against their own country. Through her secure data link, she accessed the satellite communication frequencies that RICO had identified and began running them through her onboard electronic warfare systems. The encryption was sophisticated, but not sophisticated enough to resist the quantum processing capabilities built into the latest F-22 upgrades. Within minutes, fragments of decoded transmissions began appearing on her display. The messages were brief, technical, and terrifying. Grid coordinates for American nuclear facilities, radar signatures for the latest stealth aircraft prototypes, electronic warfare countermeasures that could neutralize American missile defense systems. Someone was using stolen American technology to compile an intelligence package that could cripple American military capabilities for decades. "Rico, I'm transmitting you a data package on backup frequency," she whispered into her microphone. "Copy everything and prepare to data link it to higher authority if something happens to me." "Ghost, what the hell are you seeing over there?" Before she could respond, her radar warning receiver erupted with threat indicators. Multiple surface-to-air missile sites throughout the Nevada range had achieved tracking locks on every aircraft in the formation. The message was clear. Everyone in the sky was now a potential target, including the 12 F-22s that had been ordered to provide escort services. "All aircraft, this is Overwatch Control. Maintain current heading and altitude. Any deviation will be interpreted as hostile action." The threat was directed at everyone in the formation, but Adrian realized it was specifically meant for her. Someone had been monitoring her electronic warfare activities and knew that she was decoding transmissions that were supposed to remain classified. The question was whether her own command structure would protect her or sacrifice her to maintain whatever operation was unfolding above the desert. Wraith Flight, Wraith 11, maintain formation and prepare for possible evasive action. Brooks's transmission violated direct orders, but it told Adrian that her flight leader was finally beginning to understand the scope of what they'd been drawn into. The sky that had seemed so vast moments before now felt like a trap, with American pilots caught between loyalty to their country and survival, in an operation that served interests they were not allowed to understand. The surface-to-air missile warning tones filled every cockpit in Wraith Flight as ground-based radar installations painted them with targeting solutions that could turn their advanced fighters into expanding balls of flame within seconds. Adrian felt sweat beading under her helmet, despite the cockpit's environmental controls, her hands steady on the flight controls, while her mind calculated survival options that grew narrower with each passing moment. Overwatch Control, Wraith 11 requesting clarification on threat posture. Are we under attack or are you painting us for identification? Brooks's voice carried the controlled tension of a pilot who knew that his next words might determine whether 12 American airmen lived or died. Wraith 11, maintain current course and altitude. Threat indicators are for range safety purposes only. Range safety. The euphemism would have been laughable if it weren't being delivered by someone with the authority to order missile launches against American aircraft. Adrian realized that they weren't participants in this operation. They were witnesses who had seen too much, and their continued existence depended entirely on their willingness to forget everything they'd observed. Through her data link, she continued monitoring the encrypted transmissions from the unmarked F-22s. The intelligence package being compiled was even more comprehensive than she'd initially realized. Satellite imagery of American submarine bases, electronic signatures from the latest naval radar systems, technical specifications for weapons that wouldn't enter service for another decade. Ghost, check your 6 o'clock high. We've got company. Rico's voice carried a note of alarm that made Adrian immediately look over her shoulder. 4 more aircraft had appeared from the direction of Groom Lake, but these weren't F-22s or any other aircraft type she recognized. They looked like flying triangles, completely black, with no visible engine exhausts or control surfaces. They moved through the air with impossible smoothness, their flight characteristics suggesting propulsion systems that defied conventional aerodynamics. Jesus Christ, what are those things? Tor's voice broke protocol as the triangular aircraft took up positions around the entire formation, boxing in both Wraith Flight and the unmarked F-22s in a formation that looked more like an arrest than an escort. All aircraft, maintain position and heading. Do not attempt to maneuver or activate weapon systems. The voice from Overwatch Control now carried a coldness that suggested the speaker was prepared to follow through on any threats. But as the complex aerial formation continued its flight toward the southeast, Adrian noticed something that made her blood run cold. The triangular aircraft weren't just escorting them. They were herding them toward a specific destination, and that destination appeared to be a landing strip that didn't exist on any chart she'd ever studied. The runway appeared in the desert ahead of them like a mirage made real, a ribbon of concrete that stretched for miles across the valley floor. Ground support equipment lined the taxiways, and hangar facilities that had been hidden until moments before began opening to reveal aircraft that shouldn't exist and technologies that challenged everything she thought she knew about the limits of human engineering. Wraith Flight, you are directed to land and report for debriefing. Maintain radio silence and follow ground control instructions upon landing. The order came with the finality of a judicial sentence. As 12 F-22 Raptors descended toward a base that didn't officially exist, Adrian realized that they weren't returning from a mission. They were disappearing into a world where questions weren't answered, and witnesses weren't allowed to remain witnesses. The landing felt like entering another dimension, the unmarked runway appearing beneath them, with a solidity that contradicted its absence from every navigation chart in the American military inventory. Adrian's F-22 touched down smoothly, its drag chute deploying automatically as ground control vectors guided each aircraft to specific parking positions with military precision. The base that materialized around them defied rational explanation. Hangar facilities that had seemed like desert hills moments before now stood, revealed as sophisticated aircraft shelters, their camouflaged exteriors retracting to expose interiors filled with aircraft that belonged in science fiction rather than military aviation. The triangular craft that had escorted them landed without any visible landing gear, simply settling onto the tarmac like leaves falling from trees. Wraith Flight, shut down engines and remain in aircraft until escort personnel arrive, came the transmission from a control tower that hadn't been visible until they were on final approach. Adrian watched through her canopy as figures in unmarked flight suits approached each F-22, their movements suggesting military training, but their equipment and insignia unlike anything she'd seen in 8 years of service. The person approaching her aircraft carried himself with the confidence of senior rank, but his uniform bore no indication of service branch, nationality, or command structure. "Captain Valk, please shut down your aircraft and step out slowly. Keep your hands visible at all times." The voice came through her helmet radio on a frequency that should have been secure. The fact that he knew her name and rank sent ice through her veins. These people had access to classified personnel records, real-time communication intercepts, and intelligence capabilities that suggested resources far beyond any single military organization. As she began her shutdown checklist, she could see similar scenes playing out around each of the 12 F-22s. "Rico, you copying this?" she transmitted on their discrete frequency. "Negative, Ghost. My radio's been jammed since we touched down. I think we're on our own now." Through her heads-up display, she watched the unmarked F-22s taxi toward hangar facilities that opened like mechanical flowers to receive them. The aircraft disappeared into underground complexes that extended far beneath the desert floor, their elevator systems capable of concealing entire squadrons of advanced fighters from satellite observation. The person waiting beside her aircraft raised his hand in a gesture that was unmistakably a direct order to exit immediately. Adrian completed her shutdown checklist, secured her classified materials, and opened her canopy to air that tasted of desert heat and aviation fuel mixed with something else, ozone and metallic compounds that suggested technologies beyond conventional jet propulsion. "Captain Valk, welcome to Facility 77. My name is Director Harrison, and I'm afraid your mission parameters have changed significantly." The man's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to delivering life-altering orders without discussion. As she climbed down from her aircraft, Adrian could see her fellow pilots being escorted toward buildings that had materialized from the desert landscape like props in an elaborate stage production. The base around them hummed with activity that suggested thousands of personnel working on projects that existed outside normal military oversight. "Sir, I request contact with my chain of command and clarification of our legal status." Director Harrison's smile held no warmth. "Captain, your chain of command ends here. Welcome to the program." The briefing room they led her to could have been in any military facility in the world, except for the absence of flags, unit insignia, or any other indication of national affiliation. 12 chairs arranged in a semicircle faced a briefing screen that currently displayed a map of the world marked with symbols that didn't appear in any standard military reference. The other 11 pilots from Wraith Flight were already seated, their faces reflecting various degrees of confusion, anger, and growing realization that their morning patrol had become something far more complex than a simple intercept mission. Major Brooks sat in the front row, his usual confidence replaced by the careful neutrality of an officer trying to assess an impossible situation. Director Harrison moved to the front of the room with the fluid precision of someone accustomed to command authority. Behind him, the briefing screen shifted to display satellite imagery of military installations around the globe, each marked with data overlays that suggested real-time intelligence gathering capabilities beyond anything in the official American arsenal. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been selected for participation in a program that exists outside normal military command structures. Your performance records, psychological profiles, and technical capabilities indicate suitability for operations that require absolute discretion and unquestioning loyalty. Captain Torres raised his hand with the aggressive posture of a pilot who'd spent his career following regulations. Sir, with all due respect, we were conducting a routine patrol mission under orders from our legitimate chain of command. We have families, commitments, and legal obligations that. Captain Torres, your previous obligations are now classified as terminated. Your families have been notified that you've been assigned to extended training exercises with an indefinite timeline. Your legal obligations are now defined by agreements you'll be signing within the next hour. The room fell silent except for the whisper of air conditioning and the distant sound of aircraft operations outside. Adrian felt the weight of realization settling over the group like a heavy blanket. They weren't being briefed. They were being conscripted into something that operated beyond law, oversight, or accountability. Sir, what happens if we refuse to participate? The question came from Captain Martinez, a pilot with 6 years of experience and a reputation for asking difficult questions. Director Harrison's expression didn't change, but something in his posture suggested that this question had been anticipated and prepared for. Captain Martinez, refusal isn't an option. However, let me show you what you'll be participating in, and I think you'll find the work both challenging and patriotic. The briefing screen shifted to display aircraft that defied every conventional understanding of aerodynamics and propulsion. Fighters that could achieve orbit without rocket assistance. Bombers that could strike targets anywhere on Earth within 30 minutes of launch authorization. Transport aircraft that could deploy entire divisions of soldiers to any location on the planet without requiring forward bases or logistics support. This is the future of American military superiority, Harrison continued. Aircraft that will ensure our nation's security for the next century. Technologies that will make traditional military forces obsolete. And you've been chosen to be part of the program that will deploy these capabilities. As the presentation continued, Adrian began to understand the scope of what they'd stumbled into. The unmarked F-22s, the mysterious base, the advanced aircraft, everything was part of a program that existed in the shadows between official military policy and the kind of technological development that could shift global power balances overnight. But questions remained that no briefing could answer. Who was really controlling these operations? Where was the funding coming from? And most importantly, were they serving American interests or something else entirely? The presentation continued with technical specifications that challenged everything Adrian thought she knew about the limits of aviation technology. Aircraft with energy weapons that could disable entire fleets without kinetic damage. Stealth systems that rendered vehicles invisible not just to radar, but to human sight across multiple spectrums. Propulsion technologies that suggested breakthroughs in physics that hadn't been announced to the scientific community. The aircraft you observed this morning represent first-generation operational systems, Harrison explained, as the briefing screen displayed performance data that seemed to belong in theoretical physics textbooks rather than military specifications. Your role will be to evaluate second-generation prototypes and develop operational tactics for their deployment. Major Brooks finally spoke, his voice carrying the careful, measured tone of an officer trying to maintain professional demeanor while processing information that contradicted his understanding of reality. Sir, these performance specifications suggest technological capabilities that are decades beyond current American military assets. How is that possible? Major Brooks, American military research has been compartmentalized for security reasons. What you consider current technology represents perhaps 20% of actual American capabilities. The aircraft you'll be testing incorporate research developments that have been classified for over 40 years. 40 years. The number hit every pilot in the room like a physical blow. Technologies that suggested solutions to problems that aerospace engineers insisted were impossible had been sitting in classified research facilities since the 1980s, waiting for political authorization to enter operational service. Sir, if these capabilities have existed for decades, why haven't they been deployed? Captain Martinez's question carried the logical skepticism of a pilot trained to question anomalies. Captain, deployment requires more than technological capability. It requires political will, strategic necessity, and operational security that can contain technologies that would fundamentally alter global power structures. Harrison paused, studying each pilot's face before continuing. Recent global developments have created conditions that require immediate operational deployment. The briefing screen shifted to display global intelligence assessments that painted a picture of international tensions, escalating toward conflicts that conventional military